Well, a very good morning to everyone and welcome to this morning's live event. This is, of course, the crowning event of the Nedbank Business Ignite process. It was an arduous competition both on Cape Talk and 702, and it really is our pleasure then to bring it to finality, as it were, this evening. Of course, Nedbank has been our partner with Prime Media in various forms over the last 8 years. And I think it's a tangible display of their commitment to small business in South Africa. And of course, it goes without saying that we at Prime Media do care about SMMEs and entrepreneurship more broadly. My name is Bongani Bingwa. I am the host of 702 Breakfast, and it's my pleasure to host this session with you. I think it's really fantastic that so many of you have responded to participate in today's session, and we really appreciate your time, and we hope that it will be worth the effort of joining. The theme for 2020, as you may well know, was really based on the insight that uncertain times are often really the opportunity that leads to innovative change. And the call to action for this year's Nedbank Business Ignite was about businesses that have been able to innovate, to survive, but also to thrive in unusual times. You all know that prize, of course, was valued at 260,000 Rand, including an incubation period with a business growth expert, promotional airtime on 702 and Cape Talk. You know, every morning when I get to hear last year's 702 winner on my show, Ben & Co, getting that exposure, getting that advertising, it really gratifies me to know that this process is really real and offers tangible value for the winners. But just to refresh everyone's memories before we get started formally with our discussion, I do want to remind you who last year's winners were, and let's have a little refresher. This video will now play to remind you of who this year's winners, I beg your pardon, this year's winners are.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, greetings everyone.
Hi there.
Hi everyone.
And welcome to Nexatel.
I am the founder of LAVERY,
co-founder of the Alice Group, trading as Moscript.
I'm the founder of Greener Pastures Recycling.
I'm a co-founder of SKYWALK Innovations.
We're the modern communication solution for businesses on the go. We're allowing businesses to host all their communications on the cloud.
So SKYWALK is a software development firm which helps organizations modernize their internal business processes.
And we are a design house for women's apparel and accessories, and offering a sort of complete wardrobe in neutral tones.
We manufacture homeware products.
We provide an end-to-end waste management and recycling solution.
Moscript mainly focuses on manufacturing products that are sustainable using sustainable or non-invasive material.
We, on Friday, we announced one of the winners of the Nedbank Business Ignite competition, which we could not be more excited about.
I'm so excited about this Business Ignite competition for 2020.
Winning this amazing competition just means that our business is going to be able to grow. It means that our business is being recognized.
It's a phenomenal opportunity for us.
With the media coverage, the mentorship, the strategies,
It brings so much opportunities in terms of access to market, because it puts us in front of the client, the right audience that we're looking for.
And what's going to be really exciting about winning this competition is getting the incubation with Matsi and being able to really shape the way that we move forward with these new changes within our company.
so that is why we are so excited and looking forward to this opportunity.
So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Cape Talk, as the exposure will be amazing, and to Nedbank and to Matsi. We're really excited about it, and we're so grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nedbank and Radio 702, for this wonderful opportunity. We are looking forward to learning more with Furaha Solutions and growing our business brand.
On 702, we had Moscript, which is a local basket manufacturing business, and they're currently distributing their products at Builders Warehouse. Mr. Price, I know they've had some relationship with Woolworths before, and they really are a business that is all about responsible sourcing and the using of recycled material to produce their craft, a green business. So we're very happy about them. Greener Pastures was our other winner on 702, which is a waste management company. And it's a great story because behind it, of course, is a young passionate entrepreneur who's been building his business for the last 8 years since leaving school. He's only 26, and I love the idea that they're solving a huge problem for society. I mean, urban decay is something that we really have to deal with, and they're gaining market traction. So that's really, really exciting. And our final winner, of course, was Nixatel, which is a cloud communication platform. And it's a business that has found a communication solution for individuals, for other businesses, and it's all about efficiency, cost management, and being able to bring things up to scale. And they did this with their own funding. They've grown it with their own funding, and they've acquired all of the necessary certification and industry communication. So those were the 3 winners on 702. On Cape Talk, we're proud to tell you that it was SKYWALK Innovations, a software development company. And we'll be talking to Matsi in just a moment, but our business growth expert, Matsi Modise, described this company as operating in the digital space in a way that is relevant for now and the future. And then, of course, the other winner on Cape Talk was LAVERY, a design house for women's accessories and women's apparel. Right, so today's topic then is igniting business in challenging times. I mean, I think as COVID-19 continues to spread around the globe, entrepreneurs, their ventures, societies in general, right, are facing unprecedented challenges. And it's really all about resilience now. And resilience, I would say, is the ability to go on with life, to continue finding purpose, finding meaning in not only your existence, but in the work that you do, facing hardship and adversity in this way. I can't think of anyone who's not affected by this. Governments across the world have been tested and stretched, and repeatedly so, and we know not all of them have passed. And I think the winners and the losers have been surprising. If you'd been able to sort of look ahead at the start of this thing and thought about who would do well and who would battle, I think you may have been surprised at the outcome. But I think those that have done well have been the ones that have been able to set new rules, new norms, to try and reestablish confidence, to give their economies a chance of survival. And I think that's why we are going to have this conversation. I've got 2 panelists with me, and I'm going to ask them as I introduce them to just pop up their videos so that we can obviously see them. Firstly, of course, Allan Shannon from Nedbank and our business growth expert, Matsi Modise. Welcome to you both. Allan currently leads the client engagement, sales, and channel management efforts on behalf of Nedbank, insofar as it relates to small businesses, professional, medical, and non-resident banking segments. He's got 25 years experience in the sector, and frankly, is an expert in his own right. So Allan, welcome and thank you very much.
Great to be here. Thank you very much, Bongani.
Matsi, of course, almost needs no introduction. She's walked a lot of this journey with us as our business growth expert. She's an entrepreneur in her own right, who's founded her own ventures. She sits on a number of boards, and she brings a wealth of experience and respect, particularly as she guides our finalists. Really has been invaluable, both in terms of the selection of our winners and the adjudication process in general, and obviously remains a key point of contact as well as a mentor for our winning businesses. Matsi, pleasure to have you with us.
I'm so excited. I can't wait for this session. Super excited.
Perhaps let's start with a broad question. And Allan, I'll start with you on this one. I mean, a pandemic like this, a black swan event as some would call it, it really isn't something anyone can prepare for, not even a bank. And it would seem to me the last 6 months have really been about adapt or die.
Yes, they have. I mean, you know, it's, I guess, as an employed individual at a corporate institution, I guess we try and have an appreciation for what's going out there within the small business community, and we stay very close to what's happening. And I guess if one just considers the challenges that small business is going through at the moment, there's many. I guess the ones that are perhaps more obvious to us that we're seeing is just the impact of temporary business closures as the business levels, as we've seen the sort of levels play out from a South African lockdown perspective. You know, coupled with you know, that obviously has a big impact on business volumes. Businesses have got fixed and variable costs, so trying to navigate those costs whilst, you know, businesses being disrupted the way it is at the moment is massively challenged. You know, and the thing is for South African small businesses, you know, one day we were operating and then with very short notice we weren't. And, you know, how do you plan for that type of eventuality? It's actually near on impossible. And I think, you know, that coupled with the sort of compliance that businesses now need to adhere to in terms of doing business within this sort of new context, and the uncertainty, I think for me is perhaps one of the biggest challenges faced by small businesses around, you know, what to plan for going forward. You know, when the liquor business was opened initially, I doubt very much it was in their thoughts that they were going to be closed down again. And so the same can be true in one way, shape or form for many industries out there. So, you know, the challenges are immense. And yeah, so, you know, deep sort of sympathy. I think as a bank, obviously we try and be there as best we can, but challenges are immense and far reaching and broad in their nature.
I suppose, Matsi, my first question would be to you, picking up on what Allan is saying. I mean, there were so many sectors that were caught by surprise. As this thing started, we all had a sense of where we thought it might go. Add to that the lockdown and the regulations and the restrictions. I think it was just punch after punch after punch after punch for many businesses. Are there sectors, and I'm thinking the digital world now, that you may think had almost an inbuilt resilience in terms of how they operate, that perhaps were better placed to deal with this?
Bongani, it's a great question. And I think if one had to ask me if I was to describe COVID, I would say it's a book of revelations, you know, the last and final book in the Bible. A lot of people thought it's the end of the world. I mean, there were some times when it's like, God, is this the time when we're all going to vanish because something is going to happen? And indeed, it has been a very revealing time. I think it's a time where we had to assess how future-proof is your business. There were lots of winners, well, there are lots of losers and a few winners, but I think companies that were ready were those who were digital. You know, their processes were digital, their systems were digital, customer interface was already digital, and those are the companies that had a better chance of surviving because they are already engaging online, right? They don't have to now scratch their heads, think of pivoting, think of how am I going to digitize, especially the very old businesses. And I think the exciting thing about the competition was seeing very traditional businesses pivot very quickly and go online. An example of one of our finalists is the butchery. You know, a butchery, how does a butchery go online? But they did it. I mean, if you had to go to Instagram, if you have to go to Facebook, they're there. They have sponsored posts that come out. Every day I get to see about their products, and at a click of a button, I'll be able to get my meat to come to my house. So that is some of the businesses that, you know, were able to pivot very quickly. And I think another thing we need to touch on is companies that were compliant, you know, companies that were registered with CIPC, that were tax compliant, that had their employees registered on UIF, keeping track of their finances. Those were companies that were able to have a fighting chance at getting some of the relief funding that was given now that COVID hit and the government and the private sector were scrambling around saying, how can we assist you? So if you didn't have your financials, unfortunately, your bank wouldn't be able to assist you. If you're not registered for UIF, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to get some of your employees to be paid by the UIF. So it really, really was a reflective time, a revealing time of how solid is your business and how future-proof have you been able to create your business.
Well, let me invite everyone who's joined us, by the way, for our live event. Feel free to send us questions. I've already seen some of them on the chat line, but continue sending them. I will ask a few of my own and then obviously try and give opportunity to anyone who's listening to us to be able to ask questions to our experts directly. And either one of you can answer this, Matsi or Allan. You know, on the one hand, you know, we have faced difficulties as an economy, as a region, perhaps even on a continental scale, but I can't think of a time not since the banking crisis, and even that in a way didn't necessarily affect all of us in the same way. but I can't think of a time when the whole world was dealing with something of this nature. And I wonder if, from your perspective, that is frightening or reassuring.
Good question, Allan. I'll allow you to answer that.
I think it's both from our perspective, Bongani. I mean, it's frightening in the context that we haven't had to deal with this type of scenario before. It's reassuring in the context of how we've seen people respond. And if I reflect on, for instance, and I'm not trying to sort of create a sort of Nedbank punt here, but if I look at how the bank has come together to respond to its clients and the needs that they have demonstrated over this time, I think, it's been very proactive, and it's not unique to Nedbank. I think we've seen a lot of people come together and respond in a way that's very reassuring, but it remains frightening because, we're still grappling with issues that we have not encountered before. And so, a little bit of both. The frightening bit, I guess, is also exacerbated by some of the uncertainty. We're trying to get our heads around is when will things normalize, and what will normal look like going forward? And we've got thoughts around that, and I guess we'll probably share some of those throughout the discussion. But how can you be certain? Because again, this is so unprecedented. And the scale of things is such that, we have views, and the views are being created by a whole bunch of educated and academic-minded people. But there's still a fairly uncertain future. And I guess, in that, if we're aligned on that thought, and you're an entrepreneur, I think that's the sort of bit that you sort of need to sort of instill and think about when you're planning. And maybe, in planning, the emphasis needs to be on how agile can you be because of the uncertainty that we're still likely to face. And so there may still require certain levels of adaptation within small business community to whatever the new norm is ultimately going to be. But I mean, that's my take on things. Matsi, I'd be keen on your perspective.
Yeah, I think for me, Bongani and Allan, it's a function of, it's scary because it's a life and death. You could wake up tomorrow and die. That's just the reality, right? Nobody knows who's next because you've probably had so many people in your life that have just suddenly passed away. So that's a frightening part. But I think as somebody who's an entrepreneur, this is a very testing time because to call yourself an entrepreneur, these are the times when you need to thrive. These are the times when you actually have to look at the situation and how best do you go beyond this? How do you leverage what you've been building for the past couple of years? And a lot of the things that you might actually see as assets are not necessarily the tangible assets, but things such as relationships, right? The relationships that you have, the database that you have in your business. Now, if let's say I have a database of 1,000 clients, and now I'm not able to service my clients because my product or service is not relevant, how do I leverage it? There's a lot of things that your consumer base might be requiring right now. So instead of thinking, I can't sell, it's, well, I've got 1,000 people, clients in my database, what can I sell to them that they really need at this time? So for an entrepreneur, it's a time at which you actually have to test your ability. And it's a testing time for entrepreneurs. It's like, are you really an entrepreneur? Because if you are really an entrepreneur, you would see opportunities in this very dark time. You would leverage the things that you've been building over the past couple of years, and you will find ways in which you can continue to earn an income.
I want to challenge you on that, both of you. You've used the words agility, adaptation, pivot, I think, Matsi, has been the word of the last 6 months, the word of this crisis, right? So here's the challenge with that. As businesses try and think about navigating this new norm, isn't there a danger that you get crowded out in your initial space as your competitors then seek to take some of your market share because you've gone on to something else, something new that you may not necessarily even be expert at? And what does that mean in terms of your capacity to try and do something new, the trustworthiness in the marketplace, and the fact that, you may then have to re-experience teething problems that have got nothing to do with either your expertise or your capacity to deliver?
So I'll offer a view. I mean, I guess my perspective is perhaps it's not so much in what you do, it's more than in how you do it. The same needs exist. People still need to eat meat, vegetables, whatever the case may be. They still need to gain clothing. The needs of living don't change necessarily. I think how you deliver upon those needs is perhaps the bit that I'm sort of alluding to when I talk about agility. So we've seen this manifest itself within the organization and outside. So our people, we still have the need to upskill our people. How we do it today versus how we did it 6 months ago is different. I don't have this need, but my wife does. She still has the need to sort of get her hair cut and all those type of things, but how she goes about that today versus 6 months ago is different. And I think for me, that's where the need for agility lies. It's not so much on the fulfilling the need itself, but just really more around how you go about fulfilling that need. And I think that's one of the big challenges that entrepreneurs need to think about.
Okay, Matsi, repurposing has its challenges?
Repurposing does have its challenges, but I have a company that does skills training, and we do training. It was in a physical form. You'd have the people we are training, whether it's managers or whether it's unemployed youth. That used to be in a very physical environment. But now we never really thought of how do we go digital. And now we were forced to go digital. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to deliver on what our client requires, wouldn't be able to engage with the learners, whether it's managers or young people. We had to face various things such as now the cost. Let's say if you're young, unemployed, and you're on a learnership, you can't afford airtime to be going online and going digital and learning online. So those are some of the things we had to navigate. But then if we ever thought of going digital, now was the time to go digital. And if we were not able to adapt in that sense, then our clients would not deem us as being able to deliver. So I'm using this as an example of, our having to now go digital. We were forced to go digital. And then another thing that was quite apparent is the decision that we made a few years ago to have different, I have a holdings company, one that focuses on training. So as soon as COVID hit, pipeline clients now just said, no, sorry, we need to refocus. We need to repurpose our money to go towards surviving as a company. And so, I did lose some of the deals, but the ones that were ongoing, I had to then, pivot and go digital very quickly. But then I realized that the fact that we had an advisory part of our business, that sense of diversifying your streams of income became very important, because if I didn't have that, and I had my clients now stopping, the pipeline not coming through, I wouldn't have been able to survive. So I think the importance of being able to diversify your income, whatever it is, just think of different ways in which you can apply your business. The consulting business did very well. In fact, the Nedbank opportunity and Prime Media opportunity is part of the advisory part of my business. So that, came up very well. But then the training kind of just, went very quiet. But now things are picking up. I actually managed to get 2 new clients during this time because there is still a need. So we have to look beyond COVID. We have to find ways in which, how do I sustain myself, but also how do I look beyond COVID? Because in the past couple of weeks, I've had now new clients and new requests, and it's been divine. But I think it's also we speak about the hard parts of COVID. I think there's an element of the soft part, which is your emotional fitness as a small business. It's just depressing. It's a bloodbath. How are you supposed to survive? How are you supposed to emotionally survive when you know that everything around you is crumbling down? But for me, what kept me going was the energy of opportunity, saying that this is not the end, but it's a time of endless possibilities. So the energy, the positivity that I put into what was happening in my life did help me a lot, because I just saw a lot of things just coming up. And so we need to also touch on the soft side of, as small businesses, how are we coping and surviving?
I'll come back to this repurposing question, because I think it's one that's worth exploring a little bit further. But as I said earlier, I don't want to hog the conversation. So I'm going to go straight to the questions that our participants are raising for you to answer. Anyone else, by the way, who's watching this in real time, feel free to use the chat function to be able to send us those questions. Let me start right at the top. I've got one from Sizwe Yankees, who says, how do you deal with cash flow issues as a reseller? I think that's a pertinent question across the board, right? 40% of new ventures typically have enough cash reserves for only 3 months. So my goodness, this has been a really, really tough one.
I'll get the banker to answer that.
Allan?
That one was going to come my direction. There's no easy answer to that, to be honest with you, because if there was, I think you'd already be executing it right now. I think the way we've witnessed people doing it has been, one, to reflect very heavily on the money going out. So trying to dispense with whatever costs they can. That's the one thing. 2, asking those people that you do owe money to give you terms, except the challenge with that, of course, is that they're generally speaking in exactly the same situation as you are. Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer. I think where the banks have tried to assist with that particular question is by providing people with payment holidays. And I think we've seen that actually happening, not just in our industry, but in other sectors as well, where, you're seeing a relaxation on, for instance, government departments requiring payments for things such as rates and taxes, or even discounts and rebates associated with those. And so it's happening in one way, shape or form across, but it's cash flow that's causing, businesses to close. And it's causing, therefore, the rate of business closure that we're all sort of bearing witness to. So stay down your costs, take out whatever's unnecessary, ask for payment holidays where those opportunities are available to negotiate as best you can with the people through whom you are receiving supplies. So collectively, those things are going to be the things that are sort of going to help you through this sort of cash flow crisis. I wish there was a sort of silver thread answer to this, but unfortunately there's not.
Bongani, I can add to that, and I think just to add on to what Allan has said, is it's also a very retrospective question, because those who were wise enough to save for the rainy days, we always talk about saving. Those are the ones that did not necessarily experience the worst kind of cash flow problems. So it's one of those things going forward, save for that rainy day, because you never know what's going to happen in your business. And I also think that if you have a way of being asset light in your business, so traveling light, within your business, it's a function of don't lock yourself into 12-month rentals. If there are workspaces around your city that would be able to give you month-to-month rental options, where you don't necessarily, where you have a wonderful working environment, you can access boardrooms, you can have a business address. So this whole thing of being lean and lean methodology of doing business comes into action now, because it's a function of, if I was thinking lean as a small business and I was not really tying myself into things I don't have to tie in, buying things instead of renting things instead of buying, it's a time that helps us now relook at how we are running our businesses and being asset light. So as much as people are struggling now, I think it's a greatest opportunity to learn from these and say, I must save for a better day. I need to look at options that are not going to encumber me, whereby I'm stuck in 18-month contracts. Now, I mean, I don't have an office. Even before COVID, I used to work in a co-working environment, and it was a month to month. So the minute lockdown hit, I was able to say, thanks, but no thanks. I will not be coming back for as long as possible, So I think as we need to just change our thinking habits as businesses, and that's how you'll be able to preserve your cash flow going forward.
The next question comes from Adrian Jonker, and it's more or less in the same vein. And the question asks, we are running a negative 500,000 Rand. How does one recover and stay positive going forward? I mean, it's one thing to have that pep talk, but as you watch your reserves go down and you worry about, when that final punch might come, how do you stay positive?
Yeah, I guess the thing there is sort of backing yourself to trade out of it, because I think that trading out of that is one of the only ways to be able to, move your way out of that type of situation. And that's going to require a lot of patience. So I think, what the Nedbank in-house view is that we won't see 2019 type business levels probably until about 2022. And so I think, when you're thinking about that, and again, because this is unprecedented, we could very well be wrong. but that's our best educated view on these type of things, is that, you know, you've got to maybe just sort of plan for that type of eventuality. You know, so businesses may just creep up steadily to those sort of 2019 levels in 2 or 3 years' time, which means with inflation, albeit inflation is at a sort of lower levels than what we're accustomed to, costs will still rise. And so you've got sort of a challenge here with the sort of jaws between income going up and expenses going up means a narrowing of profit. And, you know, you've got to obviously look at the specifics within your own business to figure out, you know, how are you going to overcome that? But I guess the psyche needs to be around sort of muted, very limited growth back up to 2019 levels in a couple of years' time, coupled with costs going up, and figuring out how long it's going to take you to trade out of that, and have patience. Because if you've got the resources, you're great, you're in good shape. The next thing you're going to need to have is sort of patience to trade out of this, I think.
Estelle Scott underscores the point you were making earlier, Matsi, around compliance, and says, we were one of the few companies that I know of who were successful in securing the government-backed loan due to our high level of compliance. And it's really that sense that, you know, the people who had done the right things were rewarded, and that no system with the best will in the world is going to reward those who are on the fringes of what we all should be doing.
No, totally. And I think the next level of compliance, which is where banks and you know, funding institutions or anybody that's coming out and wanting to assist business, the cost of COVID compliance is high, right? Now you have to have masks for your staff members. Now you have to have sanitizers everywhere. Now you have to have reduced income because you can't have a lot of people coming into your business. So how do we as an industry, how do we assist small business in this space? How do we co-fund their, you know, their having to comply? So we need to be very creative around how we can actually assist businesses, because sometimes it's not necessarily in hard cold cash, but it's how do we subsidize some of the compliance avenues that they have to attend to. So that's kind of the other side of COVID compliance, where as a business, you're doing the right things, you're registered, and you're able to leverage and take advantage of resources given to you. But now the next level or the next wave of compliance is COVID compliance. So as an industry, how can we support small businesses and subsidize their compliance so that they can still keep afloat? Because it is very expensive.
Allan, though, let me put this one to you. I mean, I've had callers, even on my radio show, who have said before COVID, they'd never really gone to the banks for funding. They were self-supporting. And at the moment, some of them have said, and obviously not to point fingers at any specific bank, but some have said at the moment they needed the assistance, the help the most. And that's when the banks said, actually, can't help you.
So I think that the bank stance, and I think this is fair to say that it's a stance probably amongst most of the big commercial banks at the moment, is that if we can see that a business was sustainable prior to COVID setting in, then we have the mechanisms to be able to provide you with the funding to help get you out of this. So, and I think the big challenge is that if you were battling as a business prior to COVID-19, you're most certainly going to be seeing responses from the banks to say, we can't offer further funding support because prior to COVID-19, you were already struggling. This has exacerbated the situation. And so, the ability to support becomes less. But just to reemphasize this point, any business that is able to demonstrate a sustainability prior to COVID, and in fact, the way we've sort of put things together now with the government-backed scheme is that as of December last year, if at that point you would be able to demonstrate that you were a sustainable business, then approach the banks and we will provide you with support through the COVID-19 SME loan scheme. And that scheme essentially provides you with funding that should keep you operating for the next 6 months until such time as hopefully normality starts returning again. But I mean, the reality, I guess, is when the bank industry, not everybody can demonstrate that sustainability prior to COVID. And as a consequence, banks aren't necessarily going to be able to help everybody. Our first competitor half-year results came out during the course of today. And that will give you a sense as to the credit losses banks are sort of encountering at the moment. And there's no doubt, I think, that will play through when all the banks announced their results.
All right, I'll make this 2 questions because I think they more or less are speaking to the same issue. One is from a Cedric Davis who wants to know, how can we collaborate to advance the SMMEs of South African entrepreneurs? And Lauren Premier also asks a similar question around getting South Africans to trust and buy locally manufactured goods over their international equivalents. Your views on that? Matsi?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to Lauren's question, which says, how do we get people to buy more local? Well, now we're forced to buy local. You know, one of the panelists, one of the finalists, in fact, one of the winners, Mo's Cribs, have been able to get into Mr. Price Home. 1st of September, they'll be launching a big product range with Woolworths. I mean, they were initially featured and engaging with Woolworths, and now they're supplying to Woolworths. And Allan would recall when we were interviewing Michelle from Mo's Cribs, how excited we were of, this is a great brand. This is a wonderful brand. It has export opportunities. But now big brands like Mr. Price, like Builders Warehouse, like Woolworths have to source locally because it's becoming difficult to import things into South Africa. It's very expensive to import things thanks to COVID. So for those who are creating products that, you know, they could easily be sold at Woolworths and Mr. Price Homes and Builders Warehouse, now it's an opportunity for you to be bold enough and brave enough to make that call. Because you ask the question how, you have to reach out. You have to call headquarters and say, well, I'm a local producer of X. It is certified with SABS and all the certifications that, you know, a big brand like Mr. Price or like Woolworths would require. But be bold. Go and say, I'm a local company that's producing this. I can produce it at scale. And then go to your banks and say, well, I've got an offtake agreement with, I mean, for now, for Mo Cribs, I don't think it will be very difficult for them to get a bank loan or working capital from the likes of a Nedbank, because they have shown that there is an uptake, there is a client who wants to buy from them at scale. So now is the time for South African businesses to be bold enough to go and approach the big companies and say, I am able to provide, and then go to the big banks and say, well, I've got an offtake agreement and somebody's willing to buy my product at scale, but I need to now create a manufacturing plant. And that's when you now go to the IDC, because they focus on industrial businesses, they invest in industrial businesses. So the value chain of South African businesses coming up and really putting themselves out there is now. So COVID has presented that opportunity.
And to be frank, Allan, you're in the business of making money.
Yep, of course. And I mean, again, I would echo Matsi's sentiments. I mean, a business like Mo Cribs, which we were very excited about, should absolutely be able to get the funding to help them, you know, step change their business. And I think that's the role of commercial banks in this country, is seeing businesses that have potential, that have been able to demonstrate even a modest profit. I think more importantly, the ability to grow. And often the limiting factor of growth is funding, and that's where commercial banks play a really important role. So yeah, I fully agree.
Okay, let's try and get through quite a few more. Wendy says, I'm in fire protection, specifically construction. We get our business via tenders for large projects or maintenance of existing clients. The construction industry is still booming and busy. Although we've been an essential service, it was still a huge struggle. We've looked to getting an interim financial director to help us navigate these times. But even in COVID, we've done okay. A comment there?
Great to hear.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think kudos. I think it would be great, I guess, maybe in an offline conversation, because I think, as much as I think her experience of the construction industry is that it's been booming, I think, I'm not sure everybody would have necessarily felt that way. So they certainly feel like they're doing something right, and I guess maybe offline would be good to get some more insights around, you know, how that's been achieved.
How they've done that. All right, Matsi?
Yeah, it's nice to hear the good stories amidst all the negativity that surrounds us, and if more people can share of how they were able to do it, how they were able to be resilient. I made tangible examples of how I've diversified and how I've, made sure that I run a very compliant business, and now I'm able to. So let's share the positivity. Let's share the positive stories. But equally, I mean, the reason why we're here is to encourage those who are going through a very tough time right now, and say the minute you just start allowing positive energy, your mind will start seeing things differently. And if you really call yourself an entrepreneur, now is the time that's really testing you as an entrepreneur. And show us what you've got. Show us.
Matsi Kabwe wants to know, how do you position your brand, specifically your website, to become an e-commerce platform? I've launched a few products on our website online, and to get clients to buy online has been a problem.
Well, there are various tools. There are consultants that help you build an e-commerce platform for your business. There are also other outlets like Take a Lot that you can actually just plug your business into an already existing marketplace. And then also there's search engine optimization. I think people invest a lot of time and money in ensuring when somebody puts this and wants to research this or search for that, it is your company, it is your product that comes through. And then also in terms of adverts that keep popping in and out, I mean, they're quite irritating, but sometimes some of the adverts like, oh, that is very interesting. And then I'll just click away and go into that particular website, even though I was minding my own business. So there are tools such as search engine optimizations. There are companies, digital companies, that are able to help you build an e-commerce platform that's effective. There are payment platforms where, like PayFast is one of them, that you're able to actually retail your business. And then there are, e-marketplaces that already exist. There are also being able to, just register your business onto these databases, because that's how people get to then say, okay, you are in this industry, so here is a request for a proposal. Then you'll be able to get that constant need to be putting yourself out there. So there's definitely means and ways that you'd be able to do it. But there are consultants that guide you.
I suppose my takeout from that, Matsi, would be, if you haven't used these new ways of doing business, don't assume you'll know what to do. Get help, get assistance, get people who are expert at it to direct you. I'm going to move on because we've got quite a few to get through. Allan, here's a great question for you, and it comes from Anati. And the question is, for a startup entrepreneur who's never been funded before, what are the possibilities of being funded, say by a Nedbank during this time? Because you've said you've looked at where people were 6 months ago. What now?
Okay, here's where I need to make sure that I give everybody a bit of a reality pull, because I'll be honest with you, the commercial banks are not great places to go to get startup funding. And the sort of rationale behind that is, as we know, many businesses that do start up, regrettably, don't necessarily see it through for the first couple of years. There's a significant percentage that, in fact, don't succeed. And so to the extent that we were to provide startup funding as a norm, the write-offs that we would experience as a bank would be extreme relative to what we can actually stomach as a banking institution. So our approach to startup funding is, yes, we can, but we're probably going to get, be looking for some form of collateral to try and keep us covered. And that's not a great answer for many entrepreneurs, because most of them won't necessarily have that. I think there is alternative funding mechanisms out there. And I think, obviously the nature of this call is it's not going to allow us to go into the detail. But I would encourage people to maybe go to a site of ours, or a site which we power, called simplybiz.co.za, where a lot more of those insights are offered around how to go about sort of soliciting startup funding. But commercial banks, typically speaking, and I speak on behalf of Nedbank specifically, and based on my understanding of the banking sector, I think I speak broadly in terms of our peers and competitors, that we're not a great source for startup funding. So I know that for people that have tried, they will back that up with their experience. Startups are often a function of having received funding from family or from friends, if they're very lucky, from venture capitalists, but they're very choosy around the sort of businesses that they deploy funds into. Startup funding is I guess, something that as a sector, we haven't cracked. And I think we sort of still work towards trying to figure out what the best answer for that is.
I can add to that, Allan and Bongani. I think it's important to tell the gospel truth The banks are the last places you should go to if you're looking for startup funding, because the banks are wanting to see that you have traction. It's easy for a bank to fund a Mo Cribs because they have off-takers like Mr. Price. They have self-funded their business to a point where now bigger companies are buying into them. We definitely have a lot of, a long way to go in terms of just improving upon venture capital in South Africa. It's very small. They say your first funders are either family, friends, or fools. But don't have an idea and say, I need funding for it. Have an idea, test it out, invest yourself, invest your own money, your own resources, go around, ask people. But the best way to fund your business is if you have something that somebody can buy, right? The best way to test it is, do I have a customer for this? If you're selling apples, why do you need funding to sell apples? Sell the damn apples. Don't go to the bank and say, I want to sell 100 apples, give me money for it. It's like, well, ask granny to give you 50 rands, or uncle to give you another 100 rands, so that you can actually build some form of traction. That's the only time you should be going to banks, because then they would want to see, if I was to, what have you done? Would you yourself invest your first million rands? So I'd always discourage people to go to banks, because by the time you open your doors, you're already 1 million rands in debt. How are you going to come out of that? So pivot, so go out there, sell your ideas, get family, friends, or people that can encourage your idea. There are also competitions whereby you can win 250,000 rands. These are competitions where people would be able to say, tell us your business idea, and the best business idea is going to get 250,000 rands. We did something similar with Prime Media about 2 years ago. It was with Telkom, and there it was allowing companies to come up with the best technology ideas. And the one that won is somebody, she did get some cash, and that kind of funding was able to get her somewhere. So do look out for these kind of competitions where you can tell people what you're doing. You can go online and I forget what it's called, but when you go online and you allow people to kind of invest in your business before it actually becomes a product or service. And so there are different ways in which you could get funding, but the last place you should go to is the banks, not when you're still fragile and young and it's still an idea and you're still building your business.
Simone has a question. Allan, this one's for you. Can the banks set up a help desk type of resource to facilitate local growth, especially through government initiatives? Can you do that?
I guess we could. I think I perhaps would want to explore the question in a little bit more depth with the person asking it. I think anything's possible. In fact, it makes me think about a question that was sort of asked a little earlier around collaboration, around trying to sort of stimulate the small business sector. And I think if COVID-19 has done one thing, albeit under the very difficult circumstances that it's happened, it's forced the public and the private sector to work more collaboratively to come up with the right answers. So the COVID-19 SME loan scheme, as an example, was built out of necessity to try and keep viable small businesses alive whilst we endure this process. But it has been probably the most significant public sector and private sector collaboration with small businesses in mind than certainly I've seen, as you mentioned, in my 25 years of banking history. And I guess the big hope would be, and it's going to be up to us as a private sector as well as the public sector, to think about how we continue to collaborate, not only to help manage people through a crisis, but to help the small business community thrive in the longer term. And so what's happening now is out of necessity. I'm hoping that it will have opened up a new era in terms of collaboration between banks and government, and that the next big thing we do together is around stimulating the sector, not just trying to keep it afloat.
And here's a positive one as well from Estelle, who says, around the question regarding on how we network, maybe we can assist. We've launched an incubation program called Growthtopia. It's aimed at female entrepreneurs in the same space in property and related industries, fire engineers, architects, shop fitters, and we invite anyone who qualifies to apply. And she puts the website details here, www.towncrowd.co.za, I would imagine. Perhaps then as we wrap up this conversation, Alan, let me start with you. From a banking point of view, I mean, I think it was great to really just tell it like it is, in a sense, around startups and what's possible from banks, because I think sometimes we have unreasonable expectations. We're not quite singing from the same hymn sheet. These are tough times. There's no certainty as to when they will end. We don't know when a vaccine will come. We keep hearing of potential second or third or fourth waves. This new normal may be with us for a lot longer than we initially assumed. What's the way forward? If there's one thing to take out of this conversation from a banking point of view, for you, what would that be?
So strictly speaking, from a banking point of view, I think so. You know, we talk about this with our clients, is just be as transparent with us as you can, and provide us with as much insight with respect to your business as you can as well. The single biggest reason at the moment why we are rejecting, for instance, COVID-19 SME loans, is because small businesses are not, and I'm speaking generally, so forgive me for this, but small businesses, generally speaking, don't necessarily have the type of records that we as a formal banking institution need to help provide small businesses with the help that they would like. So from a banking perspective, I guess it's perhaps best coined as make sure your financial house is in order, and that you understand the finances in your business intimately. Share that information with us. You put yourself in a really awesome position to get us to provide you with help. One other thing, if I may just mention, is that we've recently launched a program called Changing Gears. And as the name would suggest, it's around helping businesses sort of change gear into the new norm. And there's a sort of an 8-step process which we think is valuable and which we think all small businesses could learn from. I've mentioned simplybiz.co.za a little earlier. And it's sort of agnostic. No one's going to hassle you and try and get you to sort of move your stuff across to Nedbank. It's an independent site that has a sincere interest in helping small businesses thrive. And enter that, have a look at that Changing Gears program and see if it will be of help to you. And I think within that, it'll also sort of give you a little bit more context around how banks think and how to prepare to get the best out of the banking relationship that you have, which we would of course love to be with Nedbank.
Right, a number of you want that address again, and maybe if Estelle is still part of the conversation, she put up the website as www.towncrowd.co. So I don't know if that's .com or .co. So perhaps Estelle, if you're still listening, give us some clarity on that, because a number of you seem to be interested in that. No, just .co, she says. All right, so that's just .co. So no .co.za, no .com. It's just .co. So that's www.towncrowd.co. Matsi, let me come to you. Your final comment to wrap this conversation up. I think you've underscored the importance of knowing where to get sources of funding depending on your situation. Whether you go to a big player like the IDC, when to go to a bank. But once again, this is the new normal for quite some time. There's no indication when it will end. Whether we just sort of adjust to this for the next decade, we don't quite yet know. How does an entrepreneur navigate this without seeing this as the ultimate threat to entrepreneurship?
I would say travel light, declutter your life, declutter your business, and be lean and conservative. I think look at ways in which you can outsource some of the tasks that you actually employed with very long-term contracts. It's a time of the gig economy. So for those of you who would have to reduce your workforce, give them the insights and the tools to be able to plug themselves into the gig economy, because people are constantly looking to outsource some tasks that they themselves cannot do. Insource a lot as well. I think it's now time for us to be able to, if you had hired somebody to do something and that person was outsourced, look at your current workforce and what more can they do? Because it's now time to reconsolidate, look at how we ourselves can be able to do certain things ourselves. Your contracts that you sign up, Don't sign yourself up for long-term leases. You can actually have month-to-month things instead of buying and purchasing lots of assets. I remember I spoke about being asset light. Rent it out, hire it, so that you don't necessarily have to worry about keeping this thing as stock. Because right now, when COVID hit, my car that I pay was just stuck outside, not going anywhere. That was the one thing that I wanted to get rid of. It's like, it's just sitting there and I have to pay a lot of money for it every month. So declutter your life, travel light, and ensure that you are able to outsource certain things and insource a lot of the things that you yourself can do.
Allan, here's a comment from Haley who says, I was a participant on the It's My Biz series. I just have to say to you, Allan, that it was an absolute turning point for me personally and professionally 7 years ago. I am forever grateful. And I think that's a great sentiment to end this conversation on. Once again, let me tell you that we will have a truncated version of it on our online platforms. And I think if there are any resources that have been mentioned in this conversation, we'll be able to provide those details when we repost this conversation. So if you missed a little bit of detail, you'll certainly get it once we're able to post this on our platforms. Thank you very much to the two of you, Allan, Shannon, and Matsi, Modise, and of course to all our participants. Congratulations once more to our winners. I think it's fantastic that even those who didn't necessarily make it right to the finish line have been a part of a conversation like this. It's not just about the razzmatazz, it's really about meaningful impacts on small businesses, and it's just really, really encouraging to see. And that's where we'll leave it for Nedbank Business Ignite for 2020. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.